All right, what's up, guys? Good morning. Welcome to Game Changer.
Good morning.
Happy
Friday, y'all.
I plugged them in my ears, but I forgot to plug them into the. And I was like, but you can hear me. I just can't hear me. All right, what's up? Hope you guys are having a wonderful Friday morning, and we are wrapping up our series today. He said, she said, he says, and looking forward to getting to a great series next week. We're going to be talking about breakthrough next week. We're going to talk about what happens when you come to that place where you're about to snap, that place where maybe you can't handle it anymore, that place where the weight of the world seems like it's on your shoulders. I believe that you should and could and will prepare yourself for a breakthrough. We're going to talk about that next week. So we're going to wrap up this Friday morning. He said, she said, he says, relationship, couples therapy, discussion, all that good old stuff. So I hope you guys have enjoyed it.
It's been a fun week.
Yeah, it has been. It's been a really good week.
I enjoyed, obviously the humor behind, working with you and Diana day in and day out, and then kind of seeing you guys be a little more vulnerable on the podcast was extremely interesting. But I actually took a lot away from this week for my own marriage.
Yeah.
And my own, finances.
Absolutely. You put the wrong notes up, by the way.
Oh, crap. I clicked the wrong one. Sorry.
That's all right. Yeah, it was a good series. Diana will be back on next week on Monday, and but we're going to wrap it up today and just kind of do a little recap and discussion. We have Ashton here on as well, and I know she's doing social media at the same time. But we're just going to talk a little bit about what we discussed throughout the week. Maybe some points that stood out, Mike. If you can open up the comments as well, and so we can see what people are saying. And let me ask you this: what are some things that stood out to you this week? What are some questions maybe you had, some comments that maybe you said, or maybe some things that were thought of that you didn't say, and we could just throw some discussion out. We're talking about relationship this week. We talked about finances in the beginning of the week, and by the way, we can recap finances today as well, and really dive into that. One of the things I want to say as a husband. Speaking to husbands out there, and even to the wives about their husband, I think the primary role of a husband in the Bible starts with leadership. And guys, I think that we need to get our role down, but it also entails provision and protection. And this is not a comment saying that listen, there are women providing, there are women that make more than men. None of that. That's not what I'm talking about. But men, the role of a husband does entail leadership. It also entails provision and protection. And a husband, can demand, and someone may follow as a result, but he will never truly have his wife's heart unless he provides for her needs, cares for her well-being, and protects her both physically and spiritually. And that is the biblical role of a husband. And I think that, God designed men and women to want certain things. And even though there's different personalities, we still are designed certain ways. And I know this, God designed man to care for, provide for the needs, the well-being, protect physically and spiritually. And the husband will never influence his wife. I've been there. So I've tried to influence my wife because, listen, you need to be a biblical wife, or hey, you need to listen, if you love God, you love me. But I wasn't earning it. And I can tell you from my perspective, to kind of wrap this up, I can influence my wife, or I say I will never influence my wife if I don't care for her. So I want us to be reminded that we are all God's children. And when you are committed to your wife, you are also committing to God to provide for his daughter and the children you would have together. And I have one here with me now. And you have to do this to the best of our abilities. There's grace. And we found this, what's interesting about the threefold cord, I said yesterday, is that, that third cord, that God cord, it can't be broken. The threefold cord can't be broken. And I think the reason it says that is because as long as God's in the scenario, breaking is not an option. As long as God's in the scenario. And you know why? Because there's nothing that can break God. There's things that can break you and I. There's things that can break our spouse, but there's nothing that can break God. Amen. And, so, I just wanted to put that out there and be reminded, men, God gives one of his daughters to us as a man. He desires that we care for her, right? And no place in Scripture does it teach or endorse that women and children are second rate to men, and that's just stupid, and it's wrong, right? Instead, he finds them so precious that he asks for special care to be given to them. And that's even if you don't feel like that you're being supported or feel like that you're being affirmed or feel like that you're being admired. There might be some things that God needs to work on your spouse, but I'm just going to talk to us, man. Listen, it's our responsibility. We have the responsibility and the role of leadership. And so in no place in Scripture does it endorse that women and children are considered second rate, right? Instead, he says, okay, there's a special, precious, special care. It's got like, you and I, guys, we're like this cotton T-shirt I have on right here, right? You just throw it in the washer and dryer. There's not a lot of special care. It's like tumble dry low. Women, it's like silk or merino wool, right? You got like a dry clean only. Or hey, if you're gonna wash this, wash it by hand in cold water. And a special care to be given to them, and it's a precious garment. So consideration that only biblically based men can provide. I'm going to say that again. A consideration that only biblically based men can provide. So women are very capable of taking care of themselves. However, God did make men and women different. And thus, due to the physical nature and strength God gave men, he's charged them with the provision and the protection of their families. I mean, it's Bible. This is not David. You can get mad or get upset or whatever, say I don't agree with it, but the Word of God says this. And so that doesn't mean a man is required to do this alone. But it does mean he holds the high responsibility to make sure his family's provided for the best of his ability. Amen? And that's what God places on the shoulders of men. So men, if you are rolling your eyes and like, man, I can't believe I tuned into this one today. On this one, really? Come on, Dave. I thought you had our back. I do. And believe me, I'm going to listen back to this podcast, and I'm going to make myself listen to it as well, because there are frustrating times. And sometimes when I mentioned yesterday or the day before, where, like I walk around the corner, I'm like, bah, 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 you wanted to say something. I remember walking Ashton. This is not a husband and wife thing. This is a child thing. Same thing. I remember walking around the corner one time when she was smaller, and her mom was telling her to do something. She was like, "You better do this, Ashton." So Ashton was like, they argued, and Ashton went around the wall of the. I thought she was going to her room. So I go back around there, and she's back around the wall, and she's like,
I'll be real. I flicked her off in the
"What?"
like a little kid. I wasn't saved yet, guys.
Okay, we should have had
Just a
Ashton.
little.
We should have had Ashton on a microphone all week, because these little confessions are going to make my day.
Ashton just said that the little
I said
heathen.
the truth.
She said she flicked my wife off back then.
I was mad. I was just like mad at her.
How
I was like
old
a
were
little
you?
kid. I was like, I don't even know. I was too young to be doing any of that, number one. But
Oh man.
it was just, guys, I needed Jesus.
Yeah,
So,
she still does, right, Matthias?
come on, somebody. I don't do that, though.
No, she still needs Jesus.
I want to sometimes. Just kidding.
So sometimes we want to do that as as couples.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes we want to do that as married couples, and the reality is frustration's fine. You can vent to the Lord, but I'm going to tell you, be prepared. And how many can just give if this is you and you're in a relationship, okay? Just confirm this with a little maybe waving hand emoji, or like that little person that holds your hand up kind of deal, right? If this is you, where you've said, you've complained to the Lord, and maybe even in the disagreement, there was some validity to your frustration, but you complained to the Lord about your spouse, and then while telling God what a bad wife or what a bad husband you have, or what a raw deal that you got, in the middle of it, the Lord puts a mirror in front of you and absolutely shows you where your shortcomings are. If that's you, and I see Mike already threw that hand in there. Okay, so that's something that, right? So God's not ignoring what you're telling him. He's showing us that grace is necessary, because I think what he's showing us is that, look, you know what? Look at what you do. Look at how you handle things sometimes. And if anything, look at the ground. Dumasani put like 8 hands. But if anything, what God's doing is he's saying, he's showing you that this is the grace that I show you.
Yeah. I think it's.
I don't know what color hand that is. Patrick Christie has like a bright yellow hand.
The yellow is the default.
Oh, that's the default. Okay.
Yeah, it's the
I'm
default
like-
until you choose a color.
Oh, okay. I'm like, man, he has a
Golden hand.
golden hand there, buddy.
I think that's very. I think that's what God does, and it shows more in your relationships than it does everywhere else. When you look at, let's just say I look at Ashton, for example, and I look at what she's doing with, her life and her ministry and the things she's serving in, and I go, well, why is she getting so much more than I am? I've been doing this longer. And God will look at you and go, well, look at what I've given you. And I think it shows even more in a relationship because it's a much more intimate look because you know that person so much more. There's times I've had that exact same conversation with God. I'm like, God, my wife and I are so far apart on one specific issue. I don't understand why it is that this is what I'm going through. I don't understand how it is. And I've never, told my wife she's a bad wife or a bad mother. But I've had that thought in my head, and God's gone, well, look at the things that you're doing. I can make the same argument back at you for the things that you're doing, that you're not providing certain things that I expect out of you. Mm-hmm. And God, like you said, he holds up the mirror sometimes, and it does make you kind of realize, like, holy cow, I'm really kind of almost being a hypocrite right now.
Yeah.
I heard on the Craig Rose show, I don't know if you guys are familiar with him. I heard on his Instagram, if I'll try to see if we can get it linked, like the video linked on Instagram for you guys to go back and look at. But he was talking about the 80-20 rule and how, like that's commonly talked about in a whole bunch of different areas. But he even put it as far as like, sometimes our life is like 80% blessing. And he's like, and honestly, when you think about it, that's a pretty good amount of blessing in a life. Mm-hmm. Like, and he said there's that 20% that sometimes we feel like we're lacking. Like, like he gave an example. We go on our dream vacation and it's that 80%. It's like everything we wanted. And then there's that 20%. Our flight gets delayed. Our luggage gets lost. And, then that 20% becomes our focus rather than that 80% blessing. Mm-hmm. And he gave, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
And he gave an example of even in regards to relationships, sometimes your spouse and your person in your relationships, they're 80% like meeting those dream qualities, those things that you love about them. But then they lack those 20% things. When you think about it, 80% of your dream is met, but that 20% isn't there. And instead of fixing your eyes on the 80% that God bless you with, we fix our eyes on that 20% that's missing. And we end up, that's how things can end up happening of, we find that in other people, we find that in other things, and we forget and neglect the 80% gratefulness that we can have.
Yeah, it's called the Pareto principle. You can type that in the notes too, Mike. Pareto principle. Make sure you look it up to get the right spelling. But the Pareto, P-E-R-E-T-T-O, I think it is. The Pareto principle is the 80-20 rule, and it applies in a lot of things. And it's interesting that Pastor Craig said that and put it into the context of marriage, but it actually goes right along with the majority of the way that we see or use the 80-20 rule, the Pareto principle. Then it is, and normally human nature is, so 80% of your sales force 20% of your sales force produce 80% of the business, and it goes on and just on and on and on. And what it teaches us to do in the Pareto principle is focus on the strengths. With the 80-20 rule, a lot of times the 20% is the strength and the 80% is not. And what Ashton was talking about is flipping it, where in the marriage, you could have 80% going right, 20% not. And the enemy will always cause us, or the human nature even in us, not even blaming the enemy all the time, the human nature in us, if we're without that third cord, that third strand, would allow us to focus on the weaknesses. So even in the 80-20 rule, where 20% of the production is, or 80% of the production is done by 20% of the force, then you by nature go, okay, I got to focus on getting the 80% to where the 20% is. And there's always going to be a lack of perfection until we get to heaven. Mm-hmm. So instead of focusing in your eyes on the imperfections, and that's where I think Pastor Craig and Ashton, a great point she brought up, focus on the strengths and enhance those and be grateful for those. And unlike most things in life, I think the 80-20, even if it's 70-30 or 60-40, Patrick Christy made a comment. I like his comment, and kind of not without knowing this, he kind of said this comment. Go back up to the big comment he made. Yeah. So I'm feeling that the more we discuss, he named his wife, her and I, our journey, it would click in her head that I'm a man in process of changing into the man I should be living in God, and will be doing his will and doing his will and not the worldly things. And so my point is that what he's doing there is he's making a declaration, but that's really what Ashton just said. While he's in process of changing, he's not perfect. He's not where he's going to be, but he's not where he was.
Right.
And I think grace has to be given there. And we have to understand, and then certainly the grass is certainly not greener on the other side. That's the lie of the enemy. The lie of the enemy makes you focus on the 20%. And, hey, listen, if you could, man, you know what? Susie over there, or Joe over there, or, hey, that single life over there, or, hey, you know what? If I could just go back and do it over there is greener, but it's not. Stop focusing on that 20% because it's a lie of the enemy. That 20% might be fulfilled somewhere else, but there's going to be a gap somewhere where the other 80% is.
It's good.
Amen.
Very
I
good.
think one of the big points I took away from this week too was when you and I think it was Wednesday, we're talking about you have to have, maybe it was yesterday, I can't remember exactly which day, but you were talking about having those moments of transparency where,
She was.
I know she was talking about it, but like, I think she made the example that like if a waitress gave you a compliment and you say that made me feel a certain way, and having that transparency, I think it's a really big thing because I feel like doing something like that, not saying something, is basically just I don't want to have a conversation about this.
Right.
This is going to be a weird conversation.
Sure.
And sometimes, like, the one thing I probably learned from this week was you really have to have that transparency because then your partner can understand maybe this, and I think that's what Diana said, maybe this is what I'm lacking and that's what he needs more of or she needs more of. Maybe I need to go out of my way to do and show a little more attention in certain things.
Yeah. No, go ahead, Mike. Keep going. I'm just talking.
No, that was it.
So, yeah. So, great point. I mean, it sounded like you stopped your point short. Finish it, man. Mike gets distracted very easily. I'm talking to Ashton.
Well, I'm also trying to make sure that whatever Dave
No,
might
I'm
need.
good. I'm good. I was showing Ashton something, but now everybody knows.
You're not on camera. It's all good.
Sounds
All
good.
right. I'm on microphone.
But no, it's very. I think it's really cool to think about it that way because I've never actually kind of thought about like having those moments like hey, seeing my trainer this week, she paid me some compliments and it made me feel really good. But something I told Dave about, I'm doing Make It Happen for our company this coming week, and something for me, if I was going to throw a point in there for both finances and relationships, it's all about the little things. Something, I literally an example last night, my wife, I'm not really a gifts person as far as like my love language, as far as what I get. I appreciate them and I love them, but I'm not a gift, like receiving gifts is not one of my things that I'm super into. But we're getting ready to go to the beach next weekend, and my wife, I came home and she goes, "Oh, by the way, I got you a new pair of sunglasses." She handed them to me. And it was the little things, and I was like, "Oh, thank you." And it was like, I was like, that's such a cool little thing. And it's like little things like that, the little thank yous, the little hugs, the little, in a relationship. And then in finances, it's the little things that can add up to suddenly make your expenses seem larger. It's the little things. It's the Starbucks every day. It's the, I'm going to get a protein shake at the gym instead of getting a bunch of them ahead of time and saving some money. It's the little things in finances and the little things in relationships that can make or break a lot of bigger things.
Yeah, it goes, great point. It goes back to the same concept of what Ashton brought up because if you don't view it that way and if you don't implement that, then you're gonna fall prey to the enemy's condemnation.
Yeah.
And that's really the reason you need to focus on the small things. Because look, we want everything now. We want the instant gratification. We want the whole enchilada. We want it done. We want to win the game like in one night. We want everything now. But the reality is enjoy the process. Enjoy the journey. And if you focus on what you don't have, or you focus on, how little you have or how small of a progress maybe you're making or how far away, you are from the goal that you initially set. I think that the more you focus on that, the less you appreciate what you have. And gratefulness and thankfulness is a big deal. And I really believe that God wants to place that in us, and really we need to appreciate it because He talks about it. Don't despise not the day of small beginnings. If you're faithful over a few things, I'll make you ruler over many. He discusses those types of small things as big things to him, as important things, I should say, to him. And so, we have to focus on that. And great point. And I think that's this is a really good way to wrap up this conversation. And let's look at what Dumasani had a good comment here to single guys. So there's a lot of single people, women and men listening, and will be listening. So this is what he's learned. Don't just pray for a certain kind of woman. Men or women listening, don't just pray for a certain kind of man to marry. Right? Also strive to grow and be the kind of man or woman that kind of man or woman would marry. So, so speaking to the single people out there, don't just pray for that person. Pray to be the kind of person that they would marry. That's a good point. That's a good point. You guys would have better experience in that than me, because listen, Diane and I we did, like you heard part of our story. There's a lot more that will prove to you that we jacked it up, And so, we didn't do it right. You guys have done it right, praying for. I mean, Matthias, I know you're not on mic, or Ashton, you might. Did you guys pray for the right person,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you're good. I definitely did. I remember.
And then God still sent you Matthias. I mean,
I love you.
I'm
babe.
just kidding, Matthias.
I know. I definitely did. That was one of the things we both, before we even knew about each other, that we'd both been praying, like the next person that we dated, we wanted to be the one that we married, because we both had gone through heartbreak in the past. And to me, I was just not going to go through that again. And I was like, I'm not going to waste my time. I'm just going to say, Lord, like, however long that takes, I don't care if I'm 55 years old and still, I don't care. Like, it's okay.
Jesus, let it happen faster than that, because she'd be living with us at 55.
But yeah. So yeah, I definitely did pray for Matthias, and God, like, put him, we were friends for a long time, didn't even know, and it happened.
Mine was kind of the opposite. Lara and I have been together since we were. Now, we disagree on this, because I remember it being junior year of high school, and she remembers it being sophomore year. So
she's right, Mike.
I'm going to go ahead and say she's right. But we had dated at least once before, and I was a complete jerk. We'll just leave it at that. And how we broke up the first time, I basically just didn't talk to her all summer after school let out, and then dated somebody else over the summer. I don't want to talk about my shortcomings anymore on there, so I'm not going to. But we've been together since high school, and it was kind of a godsend that she ended up being with me, because, like, after we left high school, which was, like, a really eye-opening thing, I just realized that she did take the parts of me and make them better. And I realized that because everybody around me told me, like, you're so much of a better person when she's around, that I'm like, it's kind of an interesting point. I should take more notice of this. I did everything wrong, by the way, leading up to us getting married. I asked her to marry me before I talked to her dad. I proposed to her while driving down the interstate, not in some super romantic way. I did everything wrong.
And you're still doing it.
I'm still doing everything wrong. If you're listening, Lara, I understand that I do know that everything I do is probably not the right way.
That's awesome. That's awesome. We have these story. Yeah, I can't even tell you how many dumb things that I did in the beginning of our relationship and Diana still, still somehow wanted to marry me. And, but it wasn't that long of a process, and we did some things wrong, but I certainly didn't have the foresight, I didn't have the teaching, didn't have the understanding to really pray for somebody, like that. I think Dumasani said is important as a believer. Be secure in your singleness, be secure in who you are. And, let God work on you. Let that two cord, right? That two cord strand get really strong before God wraps in that third one. And then likewise.
You actually gave me, I don't know if you remember this, but I've held on to it. You gave me advice when I was young, because if you guys know Matthias and I's story, he took a long time, like a year and a half, to even make a move on me. It was a very frustrating season. And there was many nights that I was upset about it. And there's one day I remember I was just so upset, and my dad and my mom both knew, and he was like, hey, he's like, you know what? Like, you keep running your race. Like, that's what you told me. He's like, you keep running your race. You keep growing. He's like, don't even pay that attention. Like he liked Matthias. It wasn't that, but I'm sure he didn't in that moment. But he was like, just you keep running your race. Like take your eyes off of the situation and put them on Jesus. Continue to put them on Jesus. Keep running your race. Keep going in your lane. And if that's supposed to happen, it's gonna happen. And you'll look to your right, and he'll be right there if it's supposed to happen. And he'll see how you're going and how God's continuing to be a part of your life. And when he does, if he's supposed to be there, he's going to catch up, and he's going to go exactly where you're going to go to.
I think, yeah, and I think what I also say, because it goes along with this, is like you just run and you let him catch you.
Yeah,
you let him chase you.
Did.
You know, because a man, there's something about a man as well. We need to chase the woman of God. You know, I mean, listen, this is how we're built. And so, look, and what Mike said is something I did. I mean, I did this with Diana, and what Mike said, it's not uncommon for men. I almost said that he's just being a man, but I didn't mean that in the worldly sense. But even godly men, sometimes, you know, you just don't really know what it is, and you gotta chase that person. You gotta get in pursuit of what God has for you. And so Mike was denying the pursuit, and then all of a sudden, you know, when all of a sudden she doesn't necessarily pay him any attention, or maybe she's going, okay, you know, then I've just had enough of this. Then all of a sudden Mike said, oh, well, wait a second, and then you start pursuing. And I remember that, you know, even though it was a short period of time between the time we met and got married and what have you, it was fast forward and shrunken down. There was a time where, you know, she called me and she said, hey, you know, I don't want you to see other people, and I don't want to see other people. And I had never had anybody tell me that. And I remember getting in my car at that particular time, right off the phone, and going and meeting her. And then we became serious at that very moment because it did something for me. And so, you know, listen, men need to chase. You know, we need to be pursuing. And, you know, and we need to show them if they're the one that God's placed in our life. And number two, women, you know, don't be afraid, don't run away from, but just run your race. Mm-hmm. And you know what? And let them catch up. And the reality is, you know, I believe that God will show you the one, and He'll place the one in your life, and you'll know. And so I just think that's some not only good advice, it's just some things that necessarily you don't really put into a lesson until you stop and think about it and say, God, what are you trying to show, you know, men and women of God that are single? And I believe that there's lessons inside of that.
It was hard for me, like a lot of times, just because like I kind of got known in my friend circle that they had this thing that they would say with me, which was the 4-month rule, which was that
I know exactly what that rule is, and I'm not in your group of friends.
Yeah, yeah. And so they said, so how many months you guys been hanging out? 3 months? All right, you got another month left. And that was kind of the thing that was going on. I kind of didn't like that reputation after a while because like, I didn't think about it that way, but I realized quickly that like I wasn't very like cautious of like, you know, the people that I was involving myself with. It was much more of a sense of like, oh, this person's attractive, I'm just going to chase after that. And like, it's like a shiny object, you know what I mean? It's like, you just are attracted to it, but at the same time, you don't have anything in common. There's not any compatibility and things like that. And so after a while, I was like, I don't want to be the 4-month guy anymore. You know what I mean? I want to be like the guy that has someone that he's friends with and cares about and wants to actively, you know, pursue a relationship with. And so it took, funny enough, like it took time of me just being by myself and being content with my lifestyle of like being single and like doing whatever. And then, you know, things just fall into place after a certain time. But I just remember saying to myself that I was like, I'm not going to do this thing to where like, you know, whether I'm hanging out with whoever I'm hanging out with and whatever, that I'm not going to just pursue someone just because of an initial like reaction. It needs to be something that develops over time and give it time and let it grow like a seedling first, and then from there continue to feed it and water it and whatever. But like to just expect a tree to grow from a seed in 4 months is not something that's going to happen. You know what I mean? And so like that was my mentality beforehand, but it's just a matter of patience. And I wouldn't say I really prayed for it, but it was just a matter of like that's what my mentality was in the long run.
My oldest daughter, Alexis, was watching too. She said, "Kill it, sis," or "Go get it, sis," or something like that. And they have a great story as well. They've been married for 7 years now, and they were dating for She was 15 years old. They started talking, and then for like 4 or 5 years, and then got married and been married for 7 years. So great story there as well. We all have good stories. This could continue to go. I love the comments. I love, look at Dumasani's nick, or Dumasani, go to scroll up a little bit. He said, I had a phrase when I was single, and this is like a pretty deep phrase. You got to be honest with you. Explosive solitude. Like, I mean, it sounds like a superhero. Like, I can see when the cape coming and be like, explosive solitude is here.
Yeah.
While I was in solitude, single, I aimed to have an explosive life in the Lord. He then eventually brought my wife. I love it.
It's good.
I love it. He lit the fuse.
I started dying laughing when I was telling that story about how my wife and I disagree how long we've been together, because I remember the first time we argued about it, we were sitting in Denny's waiting on our food, and we kept going back and forth. And I remember there was two older men sitting one table over from us, and at one point, I just saw them both literally just dying laughing.
Yeah.
And I finally stopped, and they just looked at me and he goes, listen, man, you're already in a hole. Please stop digging. It's absolutely hilarious to watch, but stop digging the hole deeper.
I love it.
So funny.
Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed this series. He said, she said, he says. Obviously, we just barely, I mean, if even scratched the surface of these topics, and but we enjoyed it thoroughly. Next week, Monday, you're not going to want to miss. We're going to talk about breaking through when the weight of the world is on your shoulders, when you feel like you don't have anything left in the tank, when you feel like you can't make it another step. I want to tell you this. It's not just, listen, those are the things you might feel, but I want to give you a little bit of faith. God has a breakthrough for you. You're just barely on the other side of that destiny, that purpose, that breakthrough that God has for you. We're going to talk about that. Diana will be back, and we believe that God has got great things for you. Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you very much.
Song of the day today, I felt just to be a little more fun and lighthearted, is Friend of God from Israel Houghton. It's an old throwback, one of the first songs I ever learned how to play on drums in church. But thank you all for tuning in. If you were watching us live and you ever happen to miss us live, you can always find us on the go, Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, all the podcasting platforms we have our episodes on, so you can always grab us on the go. If you're listening on any of those platforms and you ever want to join us live, throw some comments in. Maybe take a rip at Dave, take a rip at me, anybody on the podcast, come join us live. You can search David Villa Game Changer on YouTube and Facebook, and you can always find us 8:30 a.m. EST every single morning, Monday through Friday. Make sure you guys check out Faith Gear, faithgear.co. We have a limited supply on our newest drop, and we're actually working on a couple of new designs coming out for the fall. I actually just kind of got one approved by Diana that she had an idea for, so I'm just fine tweaking that one. The newest Bible plan is out. It's CrossFit. It is out. Make sure you guys go check it out, subscribe to it. Thank you all for listening. We hope you have a wonderful weekend, and on that note,
We out.